Howdy. It is nice to meet everybody. I'm sure this thing will not cooperate with my height, but it is. Thank you for the introduction. I think I wrote that at one point, and I love the size of this room. No one can hide too far in the back. I think you can probably hear me without the microphone, but maybe for the recording, I'll stay kind of close to it. I think you introduced everything that I would want to say about myself. I am one person of three Springs Land and Livestock. So I have two other partners, James Gilson, he's here, and then McKinley Smoot. He looks fancy with a bolo and I don't know, he's around here somewhere with a ponytail. But it's humbling to be here because we've only been in operation for 3 years, and so this is a learning, sharing, failing kind of presentation. It is insanely intimidating to say I'm going to give a presentation about poultry and then to later find out that the keynote's Joel Salatin. And so James has heard me multiple times, like I'm preparing this presentation as if Joel was here. Like I have to be so good on my numbers and whatever I say, and I'm sure I'll be off, but Joel's a gracious person and wouldn't say anything. But this is not a listening only. Please, in the middle of a conversation, if we're talking about brooders and you got a question about, let's just have the conversation in context, because I'm going to go over a lot of stuff. It's very visual. In Three Springs, we try to represent ourselves in social media as edutainment, and so we do have a lot of content, but I hope that visually empowers you to feel like you understand what it actually looks like and what it can actually be. We operate in the Camas Valley. It's a beautiful little valley if you've ever been in those parts. This is from the south looking up north of that valley. If you've ever gone into Uinta Range, you've probably gone through the Camas Valley. We have our cows up there on Wooden Shoe Lane on a great piece of land, and then our chickens run on a 3-acre parcel just 8 minutes away in the city of Oakley. But there's a lot of green space there, but more and more there's just a little bit of less of green space, and you might feel that in your communities. And this guy's out in Riverbend Ranch between Delta and Dugway. He's not feeling it quite yet, but maybe he'll feel it a little later. Not green. We got the green. Okay. So, but there's a lot of pressure, and that's where Three Springs really originated from, was a desire to be able to empower individuals to feel like they can keep land into the future, that it can stay in productive green space, that it can stay in family, that if you want to develop it, you have that right, for sure. It's often not usually your first choice, and that is the final crop, was when you develop your land. And so you need to decide for yourself, and we want to empower people with as many tools as possible in that process. One other comment, if you notice our backgrounds, we're diverse in our backgrounds. We're not diverse in our height. We're all above 6 feet, and we're all white males, so we'll work on the other variables. But we at least have some background that has all added to the business. And I think it's worth just mentioning that, we're coming at this from one angle where our priorities are ecological and economical viability so that we can heal the land and communities can thrive. We might be faster on the ecological healing than we will be on the economical because we're just getting our ranch started. Cows don't yield a lot immediately for us. And so, but you might be in a different context, in a different situation. You might already be operating a ranch. You might already saying, hey, this might be my 3rd or 4th livestock enterprise I'm going to bring on, or I'm already doing it, could I grow it? So it'll be a little different, but we have the benefit to say, hey, I don't want to balance our books. He can do that. Or I want to go on vacation, and we're 3 different families, so we can do 3 different things. When one family gets norovirus, all 3 of us families don't get it. So we have some blessings and differences because of that diversity in how we started our business. So I just kind of want to lay that groundwork that this is our context. You have a different context, so please don't copy and paste our playbook, but internalize and say, well, what does it mean for me? So this is what our weather looked like this last season. Those red squares kind of indicate where our frost dates are. First week of June is our first frost date. Our last frost, and our first frost usually yields around end of September. Does that check out for you, McKinley? Yeah, he lives there every day. So I live in the Salt Lake Valley, so I commute 35 minutes to get up to the ranch. So that kind of gives our window of when we can make our decisions to run our operations, at least for Pastured Poultry, and that's the context of this presentation. But I'm going to start a little more zoomed out because of our holistic approach to ranching, and what we started with was soil health. And I think we've really expanded that to thinking about water holding capacity and the health of our water ecosystem as well, our water cycle. But, you know, this idea of holistic and healthy ranching and regenerative ranching, it's a term that's thrown around a lot, and we use it, it's on our stickers, and but it doesn't always necessarily define exactly what we're doing. It really evolves around, for me, in this moment in my life, biomimicry. And how do we help mimic and empower nature to do its best work? And we're just stewards and supporters of that natural environment. Joel spoke a lot about the earthworm. Holy cow, what a preface for what I don't need to say. But these animals that are migrating across the Sahara, or through the grasslands of the Masai Mara, is that they are being pushed, and they are being moved every single day, and they are intense in dense forms, grazing, manuring, dunging, and then moving on, because they don't get to choose. They either die or they move on. They're out of forage, and that simple behavior is so powerful in our ecosystem. And in Utah, we're in a more brittle environment. We don't have leaves and twigs that can just be pliable all year round. We don't have a lot of moisture always in our ecosystem. And so we have this beautiful animal, like a cow, that can carry moisture for us, that can carry the microbiology for us, and then place it on the ground for us in times where it's otherwise dry. And that ability for an animal to do that for us is a big deal. So for us, we're trying to mimic this idea of a large herd, tightly compacted, predator pressure. Well, we don't have predators. Well, we do, but we don't have the pressure for them to drive around. And the cows they don't have predators that are too worried about for us. But this is our land. This is not our land. This is where we get to manage land. But this highlights a little bit of our ecosystem. If you can kind of look with me here, you've got the highway. This is not a highway. This is a road. You've got a creek year-round that runs through here. This is our most productive space. This is actually our least productive. And then we have a wetland that comes off of the foothills. And then this is an upper elevation, about 50 feet higher in elevation. And so when we look at this landscape, we want to try to figure out how to mimic cattle going across here like predator pressure. So we split it up. We've done this grazing plan to be able to say, hey, how can we take these into general areas? And then we actually compact them even more. We use electric fence. Maybe you've seen this, maybe you do this. But the idea is that a cow can have enough forage to be able to graze for the day. Maybe they take half, leave half. That's a principle you can think about. We're actually mostly just trying to graze these plants faster than before they go into seed, so we can just keep the plants cycling and the nutrient cycling as effective as possible. The cows got enough to eat, but do they seem excited to go to the next spot? You bet. We didn't have to yell at them. We just opened that fence. They hear that clicker. You never want to click a reel unless you're ready to move a cow for us, because it's dinner time or lunch time for us. And they're foraging, just side note, they're foraging at the highest moment in time when it's peak sunlight, because you have peak photosynthesis and peak nutrients in those plants. And that's important, because then they're going to get the highest nutrient value into their body. So what does it look like? What does healthy landscapes look like? Well, in our context, when we're not just letting it run wild and we don't have a healthy bison herd and wolves and other predators pushing on them, like for us, it's movement. And for us in movement, you kind of start to see maybe indicators where movement is. These are a shade structure. Where is that other slide? Oh, well, I'll show you that in a sec. But we have movement. We have lines from where our lines have been, where cattle have been grazing, different layers over time. The grass looks different. So pastured poultry. What does pastured poultry look like? These birds would last 2 seconds on their own without some protection or fences. I mean, it's a different context than a cow that has the same benefit to the community and to the land, just at a different scale. For us, it's that same idea of movement. Now, this company, this production house, claims to be pastured poultry. Any opinions? Why or why not? I want arguments on both sides. Someone tell me. They got a building, okay. There is pasture. Okay, well now you guys fight. I don't want to figure this out. They're not pastured because of buildings. But wait, you got a brood bird, so you need a building to brood. Just because they have access doesn't mean they don't use it. Okay, so but they can, yeah. There's a difference between a dry lot and a pasture. Thank you. So what if I compared it to this one? Oh, no, that's me saying, you don't see the line, do you? Childhood right there. Sorry, that's a leg. Okay, so what about that? Do you see a little more of movement going on here? Now, these chickens on this pasture are considered free-range chickens. They would all actually call them pastured chickens because they come outside of that house and they can access pasture. They get 4 square feet per bird, and they're pastured birds. Your pastured eggs you buy from Vital Farms operate under the same model. Predominantly Vital eggs, I'm sorry, their marketing's beautiful, are not pastured. I'm not just going to drop bombs all day. All right. So I just wanted to get a high level. Pastured from the American Pastured Poultry Producer Association. If you have any interest or existing operation in poultry, layers, turkeys, meat birds, whatever it is, the APPA, A-P-P-A, 3 Ps, APPPA, is an amazing organization to become a member. For $60 a year, you have an active, vibrant community willing to answer any question you have and to be able to share with you, and you can share with them. The conference is amazing, but they are working with the American Grass-Fed Association to help establish standards for pastured poultry. The highest level one is the fact that half of its life is spent on pasture. What will or movement be defined in part of that? They're working on that language. It's above my pay grade. But I think it's just good to kind of set this idea of what we're talking about when we talk about pastured poultry. So back to us for a minute. We bought these 3 cows in 2021, these 3 pair. And then all of a sudden we said, well, when's the money coming? I guess we'll wait for we got 2 heifers and a steer, so I guess we'll just slaughter the steer, but we'll do that in 2 years. So we need money. And we had a good partner here, James, that just took some initiative and ordered 150 chicks. And I don't know if any of you had this feeling the first time you get a box of chicks, but it's maybe a similar feeling when your first child is in your arms. And you're like, I hope I don't kill this thing.
Look at him in there.
Listen to James. Did you hear you say it? What are we doing? Yeah. That summarizes it. So within a day, McKinley and James built a brooder out of a tin shed and made it work. No one died for 3 weeks. I think James was closer to dying than these birds. And it was aggressive. We had temperature ranges in that June from 100 degrees as a high to 45, and we're just using like little heat lamps. And some of you have probably gone through this with birds. They're semi-resilient. Depends on the breed. But when we all of a sudden had to get them out to pasture, and we didn't have a structure for them to go out to pasture. And Joel Salatin has this book, Polyface Designs, and it is like the Bible and Lego came together and created a really good instruction manual for the pasture. And it takes a lot of time. The worst thing he does in that book is he will help you build, you know where I'm going with this. He will help, you'll go through 40 steps, and you're like, oh, dude, we're on step 40 of 80. We're good. And then you get done at step 40, and he goes, now redo step 15, 40 to 40, 30 more times. And you're like, oh my gosh, I am not close at all. But just a heads up. So all of a sudden, we decided to build when lumber was at its peak. That was cool. You'll see that in some of our pricing. We built the structure. We built these Salatin tractors. You've potentially seen these ideas. My biggest tip is that don't use steel or corrugated metal. Just use polycarbonate, corrugated plastic. It might not last as long, but it's a heck of a lot lighter. My advice, find some heroes, but also find some mentors. Chris Argyle of Argyle Acres up in the Ogden Valley has been a fantastic mentor for us in pastured poultry. It is an abundant community that live abundantly and want to share. That has been our experience, and we are so fortunate for a lot of other people that are willing to share their knowledge and time with us. And it's been a big deal for us, and we owe it forward. So if you ever have a question, not because we're better or no more, but you need a friend, you got a predation event and you want to talk, like, please call me. I'm not kidding. Like, we are there for you. So I am, at least. I don't know these guys. So out in the field, I'm going to turn off this music so you're going to hear some random little jams. But, out in the field, this is what it looks like. It's kind of hard for me to see, but that's one who got away. That happens every day when you move birds. Someone gets out We put extra fence on the ground because raccoons were able to get underneath, and so it's a tricky little bit. You have to use this dolly to kind of get underneath. Most of these structures require some wheels or some movement like that. And then you pull it forward. We were filling up the waters with just creek water, not the healthiest water, but it seemed fine for them. And then we got to put down that extra fence work to protect them. Sometimes we tried soaking the feed to let it ferment for a day. That was an idea we did, and there's some benefit there. But ultimately, at the end of the day, what we're creating is impact. We're trying to heal landscape, and you can see that fertilizer being applied behind. If you can see the lines, I don't know if you can see with the light from the room, but so that's what we're trying to create. But then also we got a bird. The same problem. What the heck are we going to do with these birds? Well, we got to kill them. We've seen a few YouTube videos. Everyone had that idea, like, oh, I saw it on YouTube. I can figure this out. I can't operate that way. It is not good for me. I'm a hands-on learner. So luckily, my previous life in tech, I built up enough Sky Miles that on a Sunday night, Polyface promoted someone else's workshop to show how to process poultry. It just happened to be in North Carolina. Monday morning, I told my wife, I think I'm going to North Carolina. And that night, I flew to North Carolina. And then the next morning, I drove the only rental car they had available, a Shelby Mustang. And and went into Asheville, North Carolina, and learned how to process chickens. And I was so fortunate because So the Land and Jason Contreras and his family, no one else registered because it was poorly marketed. It's like the only time he doesn't know how to market himself. And I spent the day with their family. It was just me and them. And they showed me, we processed 30 birds together. And I felt like after that, like I could just, like, I know this. I know how to, like, I'm ready. You know, like, you're feeling pumped. But, you know, our context was different. We didn't have the same structures or access to stuff. And so we used our shade structure, mobile shade haven, and we had family and friends come out. I think our first day we slaughtered 36 birds. That's a horrible rate for that many people. Missionaries came out. One dumb one cut his thumb. He was the expert one. He was killing a bird like this, and then he thought, oh, I'm going to go do it from the other side. And he, like, was not oriented well and took a Havlon to his hand. Anyway, God bless him. And, yeah, we ended up after 2 days with 130 processed birds. And that was our first season, and we thought, giddy up, we did it. Good heavens. And they sold quickly. Family, friends, you could place 130 birds. Like, we could figure that out, and we did. But you kind of get left feeling a little bit of loss. You know, maybe you have a smaller herd or even a larger herd, and you have one less steer, you got one less sheep, whatever that is. I hope you feel lost for that life a little bit. You see it manifested in the land, that life still goes on, and that's beautiful. And for us, what was beautiful is that in our community of those 130 birds, I think we sold like 20 or 30 of them to Recycle Utah at a great discounted rate, but we still needed some money. And, you know, they have over 35 producers within a 100-mile radius to provide this meal for the community. And we barely knew the community, and they already just welcomed us in, and it's been a huge catalyst for us. And so to gather around food, especially the food you raise, is a blessing. So here's the question: is it profitable? That's the whole idea. Is you're probably here trying to figure that out. Well, there's Google spreadsheets is a B. It's not it can be your friend. It probably isn't your partner's friend sometimes, because I play around with stuff, and I'm like, hey, what if we did 300 birds next year? You know? And they're like, yeah, okay, well, we could do like 2 batches, and like that would be great. And I was like, but wait a minute, dude. What if we mess around with some stuff? Like, look at that bottom line, dude. It's the top line, but there'll be a bottom line. We'll figure it out. It can be profitable, right? And that's a pretty rudimentary spreadsheet, by the way. I know. So the answer is yes, it's profitable. Thank you. Have a good night. It's a little more than that. But for us, it's like, man, what's the opportunity? My best guess, prove me wrong, but we raised 1,000 birds last season and the season before, and I make the claim that we're one of the largest poultry producers in the state of Utah, and that's ridiculous. A third-year rancher should not be saying that, and I think our community needs so many more poultry producers, and that it will be so long before we are ever competitive. I do not think that needs to be a consideration here. We need to support each other and create food in our own backyards. And this, you know, when we eat 9 billion chickens a year in this country, if we want some more resiliency in our food system in the state of Utah, we need to step up our game when it comes to our protein, and specifically in the chicken deficit. And the reason that exists is because chicken has become so industrialized that it's become so cheap relative to the real cost of raising chicken. And that's a challenge. So this is like my only slide with text because I don't like writing. But I think these are important things to think about as you are trying to figure out poultry production for you. And the context, again, is different depending on where you are. My biggest comment, again, is we're not competing against each other. We're competing against Tyson and food that is less nutrient dense, less healthy, and its practices are killing our earthworms, to take Joel's words. You know, for us, we are fortunate that we live in, we operate in Summit County. It has the highest household income of any county in the state of Utah. It doesn't take long to drive the streets of Park City and feel like you're in LA or Bougieville. And so, but what you can think about is, this is just a spreadsheet I can share with you, is that you got to look at your county, you got to understand household income, you got to understand population density, and say, can I sell in my own backyard, or I need to go sell in the community next to me as well? Joel talks about having an access to a community of at least 25,000 people within a mile radius of where you are, an hour radius of where you are. And you know, do you have that support? Because that can be a challenge. For us, we're very fortunate with I could tell someone $12 a pound for a whole bird, and they say, great. You know, like, there's a little bit of flexibility for us. So when you're raising a bird, these are the first questions you got to ask yourself. What kind of breed do we want? These make a difference here. A majority of pastured poultry producers run Cornish cross. I always tell people, this is the same bird you're getting at Ruth's Chris or at Chick-fil-A. It's Cornish cross. But for us, it's how you feed it, how you raise it, and that changes the flavor profile and the nutrient density profile. You're going to get a different flavor profile faster with a Ranger, a Freedom Ranger. It just takes you a little longer to get it to that size, 10 to 12 weeks, but still very much a viable option. For us, we should move to this for high elevation because they drop like flies at higher elevation. We'll talk about that later. No, sorry, Cornish cross too. Cornish cross, I call them the Frankenbird. I mean, they're hyper hybridized they're everything but genetically modified. I mean, so I'm being very honest there. But you got to play the game a little bit, and if that's the bird that exists in the market, we're going to start there, but raise it differently and heal the land differently, and maybe optimally over time. We're pure heritage, but we can't do that yet to stay in business. So this is just, again, I'll have a QR code at the end. You can take a picture. I have a massive spreadsheet that has like 20 tabs on it, and it's just a publicly viewable spreadsheet, and it's got almost anything that's here you can see and just access. So and then you can copy it down and mess around with yourself. I take no liability for your business operations in the future. But there's a helpful link for you about places you can think about buying for hatcheries. I'll just say that we like Whelp because they don't charge us until 3 days after they arrive. and so they can reimburse us for mortality. I have all 1,500 of our birds ordered right now. If I want to, I can cancel them the Friday before they hatch. No consequence to me. I'm not trying to be a jerk, but I just have that flexibility to be able to at least feel like I've reserved my birds, and I can build my business around that or cancel if I need to. Feed is an important variable. This is how we think about feed when it comes to a broiler, a meat bird on pasture. 2 pounds, and then I usually say 12 pounds, but there's some variability there depending on, again, your breed and how long you're on pasture and feeding them. But feed is a really important variable. It's going to be your largest cost as a poultry business, and so it's important to think about. Our journey in poultry started with saying, hey, let's save money and buy from organic, non-GMO, because our Park City people like those labels. And then this year, let's do something cooler. We'll do non-corn, non-soy in our feed because they want lower omega-3 6 ratio seed oils in their feed and in their food. Okay, we can support that. People will buy that. Well, the first thing we decided, and we're gonna fix shipping because we're only gonna do shipping once. We're gonna pay that $1,800 shipping fee once, and we're gonna have all of our feed. What's a problem with getting all your feed at once? Storage. Okay, what else? What's that? Going bad. How fast do you think feed goes bad? Yeah. Well, when it gets wet, when it gets too hot. The moment it's been crushed from a whole seed, you should ideally be using it within 2 to 4 weeks, at least at the most 2 months. But we just we couldn't pay for that quality type of feed label-wise. multiple times, do these LTL, less than full load shipping. It's going to cost us $1,000 every time to get 2,000 pounds. And they won't mill it for you unless you have a minimum. So we're kind of in this weird dance and game with them. And then they get it, and the label on it. Can you guys see what it says on that label? Beef finisher. That was a fun moment for James to read, and it was an even funner text to see. And so we're freaking out, like wrong feed. Yeah. Oh, I'll show you. Yeah, thank you. But the problem was also we don't have trust in our feed. They reaffirmed us it's the right kind of feed. Okay, great. But then you start seeing some things like all of this extra feed in the brooder, which is indicating that they're going through the feed and only picking out the things that they want. So there's something about this other feed that they don't like. And then when we put them out to pasture, first of all, I know, I had a good idea and then it turned out to be a really bad idea. Facebook already told me that. I created more corners. Birds, don't create corners for your birds because they're just going to, I thought creating at least more corners would spread them out more to more corners. They just smothered the hell out of each other. But why are they so cold? They didn't do this the year before. Why in the heck is their leg doing this? Okay, so we're kind of getting into this weird world. Well, I put on my math hat and said, well, let's take some birds that are on the current feed and let's get some other feed, and we're going to feed them side by side. Our 2-week-old birds that were back on corn and soy were already bigger than our 4-week-old birds on the other feed. And they should be doubling their weight every week, especially in this first weeks. So can you see that problem? You got a bird that's underweight. The first 3 weeks are vital for a bird to be able to get durable and get growth. It's kind of like you establish all your bone mass as a human into your 20s and 30s, and then it's just a slow decline afterwards. It's kind of like that with the birds. Like, you got to get them in the brooder in the first 3 weeks to really be hardy and substantial to then build off that growth in the pasture, and we just were not doing it. This is going to nerd out for a minute, just so you know. When we say corn-free, soy-free, if you're in the feed world long enough and we're just getting up to speed on it, you got to figure out, well, what the heck are you going to replace it with? You know, corn is high energy, and soy is high protein, and we got to do something. And so they swapped out the corn for barley and the soy for sesame seed. Well, sesame seed, got to remember my words here. Sesame seed has a different nutrient profile. It's higher in linoleic acid, which is something to think about, but not the end of the world. And then some of these other variables are pretty similar. You can notice the calcium's different. And the calcium's different because sesame seeds have phytic acid. Phytic acid binds with other elements and makes it harder for mineral absorption, minerals specifically like calcium and zinc. And so what they do is they add additional calcium. You can see we have more calcium here than there in the feed to make up for the lack of their ability to uptake it. I'm kind of nerding out here, but I want you to see and understand that ultimately, if you're going to have a successful poultry production, you have to own every element of your business. Even if you're not the one producing it, you have to feel more confident in it. Otherwise, you're going to try to do this game, but you have to do this game first. It's management. It's your decision making. It's your lack of understanding the entire landscape. That it falls back on me. It falls back on you. That's my biggest advice. And it's not pretty when you have to do that. I'm not that pretty to look at in the mirror. So anyway, that's kind of, as we're thinking about this feed, those are some big variables. We talked to our the feed provider. Fertrell is an amazing nutritional consulting group. If you're ever thinking about creating feed for any livestock, Fertrell should be your number one stop. The man there named Jeff Maddox is so kind, and I emailed them, not paying them a dime, and he's pointed me to a journal from a dairy farmer friend of his that cited that phytic acid is higher in brown sesame seed than white sesame seed. Brown or black sesame, as we think about it. Okay, go with me here. Organic sesame seeds, are those being raised in the United States? Probably not. No, most likely in India or China. If you are a small China producer making your sesame seed, you can say the same thing for an American selling it to China. Are you always separating your seeds? Hard to say. But what we do know is that when you have higher phytic acid, it doesn't matter if you add more calcium. You need to add more calcium. So we have raw seeds. We should be 4.2, but we were more in the 6.5. And so I'm nerding out here for a moment only just to share with you, okay, they aren't getting enough calcium. What happens when you don't have enough calcium in your body and it's imbalanced, especially with phosphorus? Well, you get rickets. Our birds were getting rickets, and they were not having good bone development and muscle development because of the feed. Is that a fun journey to learn? No. Like, it sucks, yeah. Yes, it would, for sure. It's something to be aware of when you're doing corn-free, soy-free feed for your layers as well. Yeah, absolutely. So, I've got a slide here somewhere. We did a nutrient density analysis. Utah State University, there's another speaker here named Stefan Van Vliet. He has sampled over 300 ranches' ribeyes, their forage, and their soil, and noted what their practices are on the ranch to correlate nutrient density of meat relative to practices and to what the animal ate in its last 100 days. So we sent our chicken into it. The craziest thing is that when you think about feeding a chicken corn-free, soy-free, you would assume that would have lower omega 3 to 6 ratio because it's not getting as much of those seed oils in its body. The opposite happened. The corn and soy birds were lower on the omega 6, 3 ratio, which is what you want ideally. We're putting a lot of seed oils in our body because of just processed foods. And so anyway, that really caught us off guard. That really sucked. But I would recommend whatever meat you're producing, especially if you're going to do chicken, it's $30 per bird. We did some intensive stuff with metabolomics and these other things, so it costs $3.50 a bird, and we have a grant from Park City Community Foundation to help us with that. But we know, and that's hard because one of our birds tested for arsenic, and I was talking to Stefan. I'm like, "What is that?" And he's like, "It's probably from the feed." So what should we have done? Like, let's do this again. Talk to the man in the mirror. And in my opinion, I'll show you, but we need to sample our feed. I think every tote you get of your feed, you need to sample and send it into the lab. You can Google animal feed testing. USU has a lab, and you want to profile for that. So anyway, this is what omega 6 and 3 looks like. It's opposite from what we were expecting. Linoleic acid is an acid you generally don't want as much, and so pretty similar across the board. You can see we have a Mary's chicken in there, just to kind of, Mary's organic. I can't say it was pastured, but just to kind of understand conventional. An organic chicken these days can just be fed organic feed and be in a factory, and maybe have access to the same kind of outdoor space that's mostly dirt. And then they're like, well, I don't want to go to that grass 500 feet away because there's probably an eagle that will take my life. So they stay close to home. ALA is more of a beneficial acid, and we did notice that we were getting more of that in our pastured poultry, in the birds that had the later feed. So honestly, we're confused by this data, and so is Stefan. And then I talked to him last night, and I was like, sesame seed, phytic acid. He's like, oh my gosh, that makes a lot more sense. Like, he didn't understand those variables, and now he's like, yeah. So I'm sharing a lot around feed. But I think it drives home the point. It is your largest expense, and you need to own it more. What are we doing to try to address that? Well, we're going to buy a feed probe. I haven't talked to the pards about this, but we'll buy a feed probe and sample that. What it does is it goes down into it's a double barrel stake, and so it's closed. It goes in. You go corner to corner on a tote all the way through diagonally down, and then you open it up. Get samples from every side, edges, middle, top, close it, and then you pull it out, and that's your sample mix, sampling the whole feed. And we'll send that in. For us, these are the things I'd recommend testing for. So anyway, that's it on feed. Any questions or other comments on feed, though? That was kind of a little bit of a vomit, yeah. It's yeah. We could just turn this into a discussion about that, and I would love it. And honestly, I would love to chat more. The answer is yes, we are currently non-GMO. Now in the world, it's getting more popular to say, are you Project Butterfly? What the heck's it called? Is anyone in here? Project non-GMO verified. It's like an additional verification above and beyond just saying non-GMO. I would say Joel Salatin doesn't buy his feed from a producer that's labeled non-GMO, but he knows that his miller tests every batch for glyphosate. And that's what Joel is really trying to solve for. And so if you can we tell people to know your farmer, know your rancher, and I look at myself and say, I need to know my miller. I need to know my grower and my miller. And like, we're not down that part of the value chain. If we knew a mill that was glyphosate free and had growers that were glyphosate free, generally I'd feel pretty confident going with someone like that. But non-GMO is more important to me. When I'm buying organic inputs that are coming from India and across the ocean, like, this isn't like a nationalism thing. To me, it's about sustainability and also supporting your local food system. I do think that is important, but some doesn't have to come from across the ocean to feed your birds. That feels silly. It's Leland Mills. Yeah, I know. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. One thing you could do there, though, just a sidebar, I love you asking this, is what we want mixed into our feed in the future that we are supplementing now is Fertrell makes something called a NutriBalancer. 60-pound bag costs you $110, and it goes to 2,000 pounds of feed. So we just kind of hand mix it in. But it is probiotics, vitamins, minerals. And so we use that as a supplement so maybe try that. Maybe, yeah, that could be interesting. But yeah, we try to talk to Jake as well. I feel like we had to start a mutiny here pretty soon with old Jakey boy. Jake, where the hell are you? So he should be here. I need it. I called it once and they won't give it to me anymore. I wonder why. I'm sure he'll talk to me. He's, whatever. That's therapy. We'll talk about that later. Yeah, so when you buy the feed, you need to hold them accountable to the label that says what they have. They do a max and min and hold them accountable to the label. And you should verify before you buy that feed and say, hey, I'm testing my feed. If it's outside of these parameters, will you give me a refund? And I would just have an email exchange to say that. We didn't do that, but knowing what we know now, that's what I would do. Amino acids are real important. Don't forget about like a methionine or a lysine. Methionine, if they have no low methionine, you're going to see them cannibalize each other because they're not getting enough of that, and they can get it from fresh meat. Supplement with fish meal real quick. Just give them a big jack or find some roadkill or whatever, but just get them that source of fresh blood, and they'll bounce back. All right. Any other questions? Okay. I think we're doing okay on time. I'm having a great time up here. It's a little traumatic, but we're good. So that was probably our longest story and deepest, but again, biggest expense. When we're talking about profitability, we got to own and understand that element, absolutely. So these brooders are out of Polyface Designs book. We put them on a running gear. We got that for $2,000. From a neighbor, and it has been fantastic because when we're winterizing it, we even raised chicks at McKinley's side of his house for more convenience, so he didn't have to go drive to check on the chicks that first year, and then we drove them down to the pasture a mile, and they just transported it in the structure. On day one, when we get our chicks, the first thing we do, I just grab them, put them between my head, dip them into water. Oh hell!
Just like that, they're already exploring.
Gallon of water, quarter cup of sugar, tablespoon of apple cider vinegar. Make your water warm. That's a very big deal. Think about this tiny little object that weighs 50 grams. 50 grams. You give it cold water and that cycles through its body, it's going to immediately drop its body temperature. So really think about warm water, especially in those first week of life. We put them out on trays, really accessible to feed. Give it contrast, put it on crinkly butcher block paper is really good with high contrast again so that they can easily see it, go to it. We use something called grow gel. It's allowed even in organic for the first 72 hours of life. It's usually what comes into your boxes. You see like some like little green blob in your box. You're like, what is that? It's not their manure. It's a electrolyte vitamin that they get for the first hours of life, days of life. That's what a brooder setup looks like for us. Our feed bin, we use supplemental feeders. You were asking about this. Someone was that you asking about feed? So we use little feed trays, but then we also, and we'll just scatter it on these little trays for the first week and also on a butcher block, almost like a lunch tray. Think about a cafeteria tray. That would be ideal, honestly. Just get a bunch of those, especially for that first week. And then we actually introduce our big red hanging feeders that we're going to use in the field. You want to keep them consistent on knowing where to go for feed. So as much as you can kind of have similar feed styles in the brooder and then in the pasture, that's going to be beneficial. We use one space array heater that keeps them warm. I actually think you can do spotlights. You think about a natural bird instinct. It is not constantly nestled into its mother's wing. It's warm, it goes out. It's warm, it goes out. And so the design of that brooder is really the whole thing is warm, but you're very much also able to have enough heat warmers spot lit that they can go in, manage, and then move back out, and that's okay. As long as you have water and feed readily available, you don't have to have the whole thing all the same temperature. There's also I didn't show other brooders, but there's one called an Ohio brooder that I think is very resourceful and something to think about. It's like this weird little 4x4 box. Like you're trying to like hot box the birds and they can go underneath it and then come back out. I don't know. Ohio breeders, check them out. But then accountability for us. I like data. I hate recording it sometimes when you're stressed and you got 1,000 birds on the pasture. But this is a sample and it'll be on that spreadsheet of what we were trying to track every single day. When we had 4 different batches going all at the same time, not as fun to try to record it. We did not get as detailed. I know we look really good up there right now. It did not look that good at the end of their lives because you're like, yeah, they're good here. Okay, yeah, they're done. And so try to find a solution for data tracking that feels scalable at like 5x whatever you're doing right now. Because that first batch, they're cute. You only have 250 of them. You're like, oh, I'm just going to sit and watch them and write journal. Like by the end, you're kind of like, I need to move on and do the next chore. And that's important to make sure you have sustainability in your business model and in your daily chore practices. At the end of the brooder, we cut a little hole out here and just kind of keep it sealed closed, but we can just scoop out the shavings here. Kinley drew the short straw, and then we just drag it down the field, and we throw it next to our compost pile. As we compost throughout the season, we'll interplay that pine shavings with this charged manure to kind of spread out. But honestly, at the end of the season, we just threw it out in the field and just looked like fairies and just had a great time and gave a little extra carbon to the land, a little extra manure, and from the place we did it the previous year, it bounced back phenomenally, and so we're pretty excited to see what it does this next year. No, we haven't. Yeah, salinity is a concern for manure. Yeah. Uh-huh. That's a good question. You know, I've heard something called like the sock test you can do is you put a sock on the front of your boot and then rock around the brooder or the manure and then you just collect essentially a sample of like what's on the ground and then send that in to kind of get a good random test of all the manure. And, you know, you could do that in the field too. Just walk where they were that you just moved them out of and test that manure. We haven't done anything like that, but I think it's a good idea. Yeah. Yeah, I'll show you a variety of that. That's a great question. Rangeland, yeah, and there's a guy down here named Robert with Cherish Brook Farms, and he does some stuff out in Beryl. Yeah, so he's close by the church dairy out there. Am I in the right vicinity? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, let me show you, because that's a good question. So this is brooder 1 option, 12 by 12. These are called Siskovich tractors, 11-inch by 6. This one holds about 70 birds. This one holds about 30 birds. End of life, you want a bird to be able to have 1.5 square feet per area. Some might argue that's too small because humane standards say 4 feet. Like, yeah, but they're getting fresh pasture every single day. So they get like 60 feet throughout their life on pasture compared to the same 4 feet their whole life, if you follow my logic a little bit there. This is a little bit where we got creative. We didn't have our birds growing fast enough, so we ran out of places to put them in the field. So we just made a shade trailer. Some people call these a meat shaw. And we just kind of move the trailer around every day or every few days, but electric netting. So what can you do with having some shade structure, like almost like a trailer that provides that shade and protection for them, but then just use electric netting tied to a solar energizer so they don't get out. The trick you'll run into is that those 3-week-old birds are too dumb to not try to go through the smaller, tighter netting that's still too tight. Premier One is working on a tighter grid on the bottom for this exact purpose, but you almost have to delay putting birds out to pasture till 4 weeks, which isn't ideal because they need to be a little bigger so they don't go through the. So I don't have a great answer for you, but this is what I've seen with people with like topography that's not flat, things like that. Yeah, McKinley. I would say aerial predators run into a great meal, and holistically, that's a good thing. Traumatically, for the birds, they seem to stay under the structure more after it happens. We did have some aerial predators. There is some thinking and some belief that the narrow you create your strip of, we kind of had them like more square at times. If you have a narrow electric netting, it makes it harder for a bird of prey to like swoop down and come back up. If you have something like in the middle, like you're making a runway for the bird, but put your shade structure in the middle, that bird isn't going to come sideways to swoop up something, and then it's going to get interrupted to grab a bird. So narrower is better for bird protection. Look, if you got a livestock guarding dog, you're like 10 years ahead of us in our ranch operation. Guardian geese, that's right. Guardian geese are a great thing as well. Just buy them now, brood them, and then they'll come in. They are, yeah. You can get them from McMurray Hatchery, but you're talking, you can get them like $16, like I don't know, maybe more, but like a Chinese duck. I can't remember the right brand, but I know one's called. I sound very simple here, but like I swear one's Russian, one's Chinese. I don't know. I sound like I'm just Red Scare. Thank you. So you got all these different structures, and ultimately we bought these ones that are 16 by 24, and it was 3,000 pounds of steel and no instruction manual, and that really sucked. But ultimately they looked like this, and they were beautiful, and I'll show you what they look like. The most extreme version that we know of is Pasture Bird. They got bought by Purdue, but they still try to maintain the integrity of pasture-raised birds. 6,000 birds in these at a time. They move on their own, solar energized, and they do 6,000 because that's how many fit in a semi at a time to go to slaughter. Quite a production. This is a sheet you'll get, but my biggest advice from looking at this sheet is some of this math can change, but right here, the run length, depending on the context of your pasture, I think is one of the biggest drivers for what type of structure you think about having. Because having 16 by 24 foot structure is great because we have 250 birds, but our run is only 700 feet. So inevitably, I have to turn a 3,000 pound steel structure slowly and ineffectively and not efficiently on the land because of that. So straight runs, pull the birds out, move them around, that's a much better plan. So think about that as you plan, if you want to raid pasture birds, what are your run lengths, and what would maybe accommodate that better than others? This is what they look like when we move them. These birds are quite ready to process. You can see it's fairly tight in there. This is a good healthy batch, and so they really just kind of move themselves. Everything's off the ground, or water runs directly into it. It's a pressurized line. It's all hanging though off that middle board. You can see they were foraging. They're immediately kind of looking at the fresh clover and going for the grasshoppers and other bugs.
All right, we've got the barb tees
You guys don't
connected.
have to listen to me.
No leaks coming from the house. We've got these Pastured quick release.
Anyway, point is,
connects. So I've got this connected to a hose.
Oh, I don't want to hear
I've got
myself.
pressurized water on this line. So Plug that in. All of a sudden, woo, water
700 feet
flowing.
running down off a spigot. Every
Here,
100 feet there's a T for quick connect.
Over
It
to the
runs to the
rooter,
structure so we
the
constantly have culinary water running to our birds.
If I ever need a disconnect here,
And those drinkers are
have the
always
shut
refilled
off
with water, and
here.
so I would put a few more drinkers out there. Honestly, I would
off all the way back
per structure so there's a little more availability.
Keep the water flowing. Show you where it's going.
Disconnects are your friends, so you can easily get quick shut-offs and disconnects. I invest in that. And the last thing with the water, just so you can see, is
Up
that
and
it comes
down.
down, but we have a Y. And that splitter is important
Pressurized.
because water gets hot in the summer.
Here, if it gets hot,
turn it off.
I can release
There's
the
also
water
an
out
actual point
here.
to fill up a supplemental water.
Get the hot water out of the
cider
line.
vinegar or something to put out there as well for the
Rest of
birds.
the water.
Anyway, sorry you have to hear me twice. Here's some fun friends. That's a skunk. That's a raccoon. We attract them a little bit because they smell them and see them, and then we have a compost pile and they come after them. That's what 190 birds look like after one day, where a baby skunk was able to get under one corner and it ate one, left its head. That's the tail sign of the skunk, I guess. And then it just bit the back of the neck and the spine, and then it just goes and
Yeah.
So anyway, you can see here in the corner where there was just one little area that it kind of dug out and it had a heyday. I will say Farm Bureau made us whole on that, which is surprising. I think we're one of the first. I had to push on our agent to get us insured. If you ever need insurance for pastured poultry, reach out to me and I can make sure you get the right policy codes. Farm Bureau is national. They should support you on this. So we reinforced, we did more protection, we did more coverage, and ultimately at the end of their life, we're processing. This is my favorite moment of our processing day. It's a little hectic, but we always say a prayer to just recognize the life of these animals. Because sometimes their life was a little rough. Our little crew of 30 that survived the predation event made a good workshop for a small group of people, and we want safety for ourselves, we want safety for our customers who eat this bird, and we just want to honor every part of the cycle of life. Our designs look a little different. Ultimately, I think the most important part for you guys to know is that I highly recommend a place where people can easily wash their hands whenever they want. Don't do it on grass where it's going to get muddy. If you're doing 200 birds, it's going to get muddy. So do something like gravel. You might need fly tape or something like that, but just monitor flies. You are protected by the federal government, believe it or not, more than not, to be able to do open air processing like this, up to 20,000 birds. So the problem in the state of Utah is there's no processing facility to slaughter birds. So if you're going to raise your birds, you're going to have to kill them and bag them yourself. And we can show you what you've done, but if you're raising birds for yourself, you can send that to a butcher, and that butcher can do it for you. But if you want commercial sale birds, you got to do it yourself. These are just a couple different layouts. We're not going to go through a processing class here today. We can get through 200 and 250 birds by noon if we start at 8, with them being killed on ice, and then we package them in the afternoon. It's a long day. How many people? 8 people. 8? Yeah, 8 to 9. It's nice to have a rover. It's nice to have someone that's just like cleaning up crap and being like, those gizzards have been out too long, put them on ice, or whatever it is. Like, there's just kind of these little nuances that you want to have, and there's a lot of efficiency we can build here too. Part them out, sell them out. I'll show you that in our profitability here. We save all of our feathers and our offal, and we compost it all on site, so make sure to get some wood chips. You're going to have a lot of dead birds once in a while from an event like we had. Get wood chips so you can compost them. And even in your best efforts, when you slaughter and process all these birds and you put them in a good deep freezer that's kept all your birds cold before, thermal mass is a B. And a freezer that can keep birds cold is different than a freezer that can take birds at 35 degrees and bring them down to freezing. And 2 days later, we found this fridge of 92 birds warm. And I call it the second death. They died once, and then they never made it to our customers, and that was rough. Regulations, look, Red Acre Center is another important organization to be familiar with in the state of Utah. They will help protect you and guide you through the legal jargon of regulations. Most importantly, you just have to choose one exemption a year. Am I 1,000 bird, under 1,000, or am I under 20,000? And technically, you should register with the state. They're not going to inspect. They're not going to make you be licensed, but we should comply to that. But honestly, I've talked to them once on the phone. I've never registered with them. We raise our birds. I don't tell them I'm registering them. We don't need to, and whatever. Just stay out of my backyard. Our sales are diverse. We primarily sell into a farmer's market, and then we do some social media. I'm no ballerina, but we get enough followers to be able to get people to order on our farm, order from us, and come pick up at the farm, pick up in Salt Lake. We just have a couple locations. We use the farmer's market as a pickup location, so if you're going to be there already and having someone sit down on their butt, try to drum us up as much business online to come pick them up there. This is Vicky the vegan, just so you know. She doesn't like eating meat, but she bought a bird that day, and her husband bought a bird as well, thinking about her. And they came together at home, and they said, hey, I bought a bird. And they're like, oh, so did I. And now she eats our meat because it feels healthy, and she feels good when she eats it. Marketing I already talked about a little bit, but community events are a big deal for us. We love to be able to bring people onto the field. We try to be transparent, even when the birds are looking not great. Like, let's be honest and have a conversation about why that's happening. Our community is so important to us. There's a lot of quotes out here. I don't want to bore you with that. I need to get to the data here real quick. I'm sorry. This is rough. We had 41% mortality of our birds. You can look at the spreadsheet and look at this more and dig into all the details. But capture all your data, record all your weights, understand your start and end. It's rough. This is how much money we made based on parting out and selling them with all the birds we had. We sold some 13% to butchers, and then we sold everything else direct. On our expenses, our biggest expense line is our feed, like I talked about. We had to buy more feed because those birds were so slow growing. They had to grow at 12 weeks instead of 8 weeks. Can you imagine how much more labor, feed, and time that was? So that really killed us. The thing I want to show you real quick is that, yes, it's slightly profitable. But check this out. So this slide right here is live. And what we can do, I know we have like 1 minute, but this is something you can do for yourself. It may not let me do it. What variables do you think I should change in my business to improve my business outcome? Mortality. What else? Yep. And what happened? No smothering. Yeah, no corners, guys. Okay, watch what happens when I change this to 15%. Where did my revenue go? 20,000. My feed is currently 60 cents. What if I could get it down to 40? I just made another $4,500. The profitability is there. The practices and the manager sometimes wasn't. And so is pastured poultry profitable? I mean, I'm no angel, but from our perspective, it is profitable. The trick is let's see here. I think it is, but if you are already a rancher, it absolutely can be. If you already are going out into the field and doing a chore, that extra hour chore is going to make a huge difference. This is what it looks like a day after. This is what it looks like 3 weeks after. That's what it looks like from overhead. You can see the improvement to the land. This is worm castings coming up from the springtime. Let's see what's going on here. And so all of a sudden you've got worms that are coming up, eating all this extra matter that we left on the ground underneath the snow because the snow pushed it to the ground. And so it's not just about profitability. These are all the birds that we see coming back because of the way we ranch and manage. Some of them we're feeding, I guess, obviously. We're bringing our community together and celebrating food together. My family's on the land with me more. They're connecting to the land more. They pray and are excited to eat Midnight, the cow they named and loved. And they're connected to their food system. You know, and ultimately, a pastured bird is a part of us to connect back to our food and create a more resilient community. And we love being a part of it. So thank you for letting me share our thoughts today. Oh, let me get that QR code, though. I know you had a hand up there. I'm happy to ask your question, but... Thank you. So in our context on that 3 acres, we have 22 cows, which doesn't seem like a lot, but it's tricky to get them up there we did have our 3 bulls graze ahead of the birds, and we recommend doing that. But in our context, it's a little tricky. Birds don't like super tall grass. So it is good to have them graze ahead of it to shorten it and also leave manure pats. Have those birds come 3 to 7 days afterwards because then it's going to be filled with larvae. And then they can scratch through the manure and get more protein source that way. And sanitize the land by spreading the manure. Happy to chat on the Hova app or if you want to come up and chat. Sorry I went a little minute over there, but thank you for the time. Appreciate it, guys.